Originally, I had a script for this video, but I figured it was better to just go kind of off the cuff and just show it to you while telling you instead of being like, you ever have this happen and blah, blah, blah. It really doesn't need to be that formal. It's just something weird that wargaming does in relation to taking a shortcut when creating different vehicles. So just in general terms, I'll explain it kind of, well, in general terms. Every tank in the game works something like this in terms of how it gets spotted. The red circles are where your tank gets spotted. They're at the middle of the height and width of every single side of your vehicle, except for the bottom. And there's also a spotting marker on the top that you also get spotted from. There's also another spotting marker on the front of your turret at the base at where the gun will rotate. Keep that in mind for later because it's actually pretty important to how a lot of this works. Wargaming kind of takes a shortcut with this by having the spotting marker for the base of your gun be on the base of the turret, which is actually what they want. And they take a shortcut of doing this by just putting the gun on the front of the turret and then just attaching the spotting marker to the base of where the gun model starts, or where the gun model will rotate. What they want it to be is the base of the turret. Like, they want it to be the front of the turret, but since it's the base of the gun, that will suffice. Most of the time. As we've figured out with the Gonzalo, there's a lot of these edge cases where things just don't really work as we think they should work, and this is no exception. A lot of people have said there was a lot of weird spotting marker shenanigans going on with the Contradictious, and let me tell you, they're not wrong. There's something very weird going wrong, and I'll show you why, because it looks like this. Now, what you'll notice different from the Conway example is there's no yellow. Why is there no yellow? Because the Contradictious, in terms of getting spotted, doesn't really have a turret. It does have a turret, it's this little thing down here, but it doesn't really have a turret. Because in the gun model files, this whole thing is the gun model. This entire thing. Like the whole top half of the turret. I'll show you a couple more examples later, but this is definitely one of the examples where this is definitely weird, and surprisingly British tanks seem to be very common with this, but we'll talk about it in a second. The implications of this, though, are more or less that you don't spot from where the gun barrels are, and you don't even spot from where the top of the tank is, because the game does not use gun models in terms of calculating the height of the vehicle where you would usually spot people. Because the gun models usually aren't this, right? Like, they usually aren't this. Usually they're just a gun. So the top of your tank is not here. It's somewhere around down here. And the base of your guns is not the base of where the gun actually is. It's the base of where the gun model rotates, remember. So it's not at the front of your guns. It's down here. Because this is where the whole thing rotates forwards and backwards. A turret model is anything that goes in a circle. A gun model is anything that goes up and down. And since this whole thing goes up and down, it puts it at the middle of where that rotation is, which is all the way down here. This doesn't just apply to oscillating turrets, but they're the main culprit. Another very fun and very, very broken one is the UDES 03, the tank destroyer. Since the gun is all the way at the back, that means you can have the tank be 97% underwater and not drown due to drowning being based on the turret ring. And yes, drowning is based on your turret ring. If your turret is halfway underwater, you'll start drowning. That's really as simple as it works. You could have the whole crew, every module, everything being underwater except for the turret and still not be drowning. Likewise, since the gun sticks out the back of the tank basically, that's where you spot people from. So you can stick this thing around corners just barely and see people. You'll also be spotted, but it basically only means you have one spotting marker for the rest of the vehicle because two of them overlap right next to each other. As for why this isn't a problem most of the time, it's usually because they will actually overlap semi-consistently with where the base of the gun actually is, and a lot of oscillating turrets are also mounted pretty high up on the vehicle. Like the Kranvågen and Batchat are virtually unaffected by this because the mount for their gun goes like really high up on the turret. Same story with the SFAC. SFAC's gun is mounted between two giant prongs, which are the turret model, so the turret model goes that high up and it's fine. I know, out of all the tanks to be fine in a situation like this, the SFAC's one of them. But then you have stuff like the GSOR 1008, where you can technically peek over hills and shoot things and not be spotted in return, even while shooting things. Because the gun model is lower than where the gun actually is, and the turret's mount is so low, there's a tiny little gap where, in theory, you could shoot something. So that more than likely means the base of the gun means the base of the gun model. That right there. He's right there. And I didn't see him. I think the most recent example is the SFAC, because I kept seeing people give this example of being able to point the gun upwards with its 60 degrees of gun elevation and point it over rocks to try and spot people. That doesn't work. It doesn't work because the base of the gun model is not all the way up there. Where you spot people from is where the rotation happens, which is all the way back here, because the gun works like artillery, where the base of the gun is way at the back. Where you're actually seeing people is from back here. Even though it looks like, on the tank, you're seeing people way at the front because that's where the gun model or gun mantlet on the gun model is. Logically, it doesn't work, right? Which is why I feel I need to explain this, because I actually know how this works. And it's very specific. Like, it's very, very, very unconventional, and it's something that I feel like people will keep saying it is one way without knowing that it's just too sophisticated to be that simple. You all can go out and do your own research with this. I haven't looked at every single tank that might be kind of weird with this, but I have looked at a decent amount. They aren't perfect with these examples in terms of where the circles are, but I've done the best that I can with what I know. They're not exactly perfect, and they're very 2D, and they're not moving, so you know, you guys can do your own research and figure out what's weird, and if you find a way to exploit this, fair enough, but I feel like it's way too specific of something you could do to actually, you know, do it consistently outside of a few specific locations like this one.